to Story Time with Aunt Sunny. I have two more stories from the book that I have been reading today called Solomon and the Ant. There's many stories in this book, ancient stories that I haven't read. So feel free to look it up at the library. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But these are great stories that were told. So I just kind of figured these are stories that need to have a voice that is given to them. So I am going to read two stories, and these encourage certain things out of the listeners. I hope you enjoy them. Again, this features a girl, which I kind of like that. This one's called Never Afraid Again. But I bet there's lots of boys who could hear this and identify with it too. Sometimes people are tricked into doing something wrong. Sometimes they're tricked into doing something right. And this is a tale of a trick that was all for the best. A girl named Hannah was afraid of an older, bigger girl. She didn't want to tell anyone, but the longer she kept quiet, the more afraid she became. One day she heard two women talking outside a store in her neighborhood, and one said, "I worked for someone who was very mean, but I went to an old woman named Yelda, and I asked for her help. She fixed everything just like magic." Yelda says, so Hannah thought maybe Yelda could use magic to help me. She found out where the old woman lived and begged her to help. Yelda asked, "Does this girl hurt you, or steal from you, or threaten you?" "No, but she acts very mean," said Hannah. "Whenever I see her, I just feel frightened." "I can help you," said Yelda. "Bring me 3 hairs of the scariest dog in the neighborhood." "Will you use the hairs to make a magic spell?" Hannah asked. Yelda answered, "Never mind what I will do. You think about what you must do. You get me those 3 hairs, and you'll have nothing to fear." Hannah went to a huge guard dog that was chained behind a high fence. As she came close, the dog growled and pulled at its chain. She found 1 hair on the ground just outside the fence. The dog barked, lunged for the end of his chain, and Hannah ran for her life. The next day, Hannah returned. This time she waited by the fence until the dog became used to her. He stopped barking, and after a while just settled himself to sleep. She waited, boy, that'd take a while for some dogs, until he was asleep. And then she reached into the yard and picked up another hair. The dog woke up, it barked and lunged at her, and Hannah ran for her life. Now the 3rd day was the most difficult. There were no more hairs on the ground. Hannah threw the dog a treat. He gobbled it, but watched her suspiciously. She came back the next day with another treat. She visited that dog day after day, always giving him a treat, and after a week the dog was waiting for her and wagging his tail. Hannah carefully offered him a treat. The dog ate it from her hand. The dog even allowed her to pet him. Finally, she was able to pull out a hair from his head. She ran back to old Yelda, calling out, "Here are 3 hairs from the scariest dog in town. Use them in your magic. Put a spell on that mean girl so I'll never have to be afraid of her again." The old woman smiled and said, "I don't make magic spells." "Well, then what do you do with the hairs?" she asked. "Nothing at all," said Yelda. "You've already done everything all by yourself." "What do you mean?" asked Hannah. "That bigger, older girl is just as mean as ever. She's not changed." "Ah, you're the one who's changed," said Yelda. "You have trained yourself to be brave. Why be afraid of her when you have tamed the scariest dog in town?" And suddenly Hannah realized how brave she really was, and she was no longer afraid. Do you like that story? Is there anything that makes you afraid? You know, just doing something out of our comfort zone every day is one of the ways to grow to be braver. This last story is called The Best Merchandise. And this is an old tale. The Jews, this story is a Jewish story, they have always valued education. And I have come to believe that it's one of the reasons so many of them today are so successful, because they come from a long heritage of people who could read. and valued education. They were reading at a time where a lot of people couldn't, and so they gained a lot of information. So this story, again, the best merchandise. A Jew is on a ship filled with merchants. They show off their merchandise, and they ask the Jew, "What do you have?" And he taps his head, and he says, "Everything I own is up here." And they laugh and call him a fool. And then a storm hits, and the ship sinks. Say that one 3 times, really fast. The ship sinks. Ship sinks. Ship sinks. Say it faster. All right, so anyway, the ship sinks, and everyone must swim to shore with nothing but the clothes he's wearing. They reach a city, but the merchants have lost everything, so they have nothing to sell. They have to beg in the street. A few days later, they see the Jew, well-dressed and well-fed. He drops some money in their begging cups, and they say to him, "We had so much merchandise, now we have nothing. You had nothing, but now you have so much. How can it be?" He taps his head, and he says, "I told you, everything I own is in here. I've studied all my life. I have knowledge, and I'm working as a teacher." The merchants nodded their head, and they all agree. Yep, knowledge is the best merchandise. So enjoy learning. It'll really be a good thing for you and others. So enjoy.